Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. Didn't have my mic on this morning. Good morning, students. And also, I think we're going to be broadcasting this to YouTube. If Kevin, if you can share that on Facebook that we're going to be broadcasting this on YouTube. We had some requests this morning for this class on Islam, Muhammad, and Satan. So this is Apologetics class 13. And of course, by no means are we going to be able to cover everything on the subject of Islam today, but we're going to cover quite a bit. So are we ready here to start up there? Okay. All right. Well, we're going to get started again. This is Apologetics class number 13. And of course, the last few weeks we could cover we've covered Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, and then Seventh-day Adventists. So now we're going to, right before exams here, I guess it's going to be this is our last class before exams, Islam, Muhammad, and Satan. So let's get into this a little bit here this morning. First of all, we're going to deal with is that it is very, very clear from history, from archaeology, from everything we can see and prove that Allah is really the ancient moon god from the Kaaba there in Mecca. But original name was Hubal, or Hubal, however you want to say it, the moon god of Kaaba. This little excerpt here says, what is quite certain is that the pagan Arabs in Mecca worshipped a moon god called Hubal or Hubal at the Kaaba. Hubal was the lord of the Kaaba, being the highest ranking god of the 360 gods worshipped in the Kaaba. Now here is the amazing thing. Allah was also worshipped as the lord of the Kaaba. So which one was the lord of the Kaaba? Well, it's interesting because Allah is really kind of a general name for God. So anyway, so you have these two names, Hubal and Allah, who are both worshipped as the moon god, but also the Lord or supreme god of the Kaaba. Yet Allah was never represented by any idol of physical nature. To suggest that the polytheistic Arabs never created an idol to represent Allah is simply unreasonable and unbelievable. We suggest rather that Hubal or Hubal was who the pagan Arabs addressed their prayers to Allah through. In other words, Allah was Hubal. Muhammad came along and smashed the idol of Hubal or Hubal, and now the Arabs had no idol of Allah to pray through anymore, and Hubal was forgotten. There are stories in the Sirah of pagan Meccan praying to Allah while standing beside the image of Hubal. And this is documented in Muhammad's Mecca by W. Montgomery Watt, chapter 3, Religion in the Pre-Islamic Arabia. So we suggest that the Arabs stood beside and prayed to him, referring to him as Allah. Now, some might say that's speculation, but it gets to be pretty obvious that Hubal, the moon god, that Allah also is a representative of the moon god, which is why, of course, you will see in a minute, the Muslims use the crescent moon as the symbol for their religion of Islam. But let's look at the origin of the name Allah. The word Allah comes from a compound Arabic word, Al-Ilah. Al is a definite article, the, and Ilah is an Arabic word for God, the God. We immediately see that this is not a proper name, but a generic name, rather like the Hebrew El, which we have seen was used of any deity, and that Allah is not a foreign word, as it would have been if it had been borrowed from the Hebrew Bible, but purely an Arabic one. It would also be wrong to compare Allah with the Hebrew or Greek for God, El or Theos, respectively, because Allah is purely an Arabic term used exclusively in reference to an Arabic deity. Now, this is something that we need to get a hold of because Allah, we're going to find out, there's many sources that say Allah was before Muhammad came along. Before Muhammad was pushing this God Allah, it was well known in pre-Islamic times. So let's look at this. Here, the Encyclopedia of Religion says, Allah is a pre-Islamic name corresponding to the Babylonian Bel, and we're going to see that in a minute, or the god Sin, the god Nana, or you'll see that in a minute. This person here goes on to say, I know that Muslims will find this hard to believe, so I'm now going to make many citations to present the archaeological evidence to prove conclusively that this is true. Though this data will be painful for many of our readers, it's necessary to face the truth. Facts are facts. Unless you're willing to desert all logic and reason and common sense, the evidence of your eyes, they must be faced. So here we go. The Encyclopedia Britannica. Allah is found in Arabic inscriptions prior to Islam. The Arabs before the time of Muhammad accepted and worshipped after a fashion a supreme God called Allah. Encyclopedia of Islam says that. The Encyclopedia of Islam also says Allah was known to the pre-Islamic Arabs. He was one of the Meccan deities. So this is pretty strong here. We're going to keep going. I promise you it's going to get even more clear. Now here is, just to show you, here's the reference down here from the Encyclopedia of Islam. Went to it directly. Allah, as you see, I highlighted in red for you, was known to the pre-Islamic Arabs. He was one of the Meccan deities. And there's the citation, Allah in the Encyclopedia of Islam, 2nd edition. So this is a well-established fact. Ilah, as it is, appears in pre-Islamic poetry. By frequency of uses, Al-Ilah was contracted to Allah, frequently attested to in pre-Islamic poetry. That's from the Encyclopedia of Islam. The name Allah goes back before Muhammad, the Encyclopedia of World Mythology and Legend. The origin of this Allah goes back to pre-Muslim times. Allah is not a common name meaning God or a God, and the Muslim must use another word or form if he wishes to indicate any other than his own peculiar deity. This is Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics. Scholar Henry Preserve Smith of Harvard University stated Allah was already known by name to the Arabs. So this is the Bible in Islam, his book, and so on. It says the name Allah is also evident in archaeological and literary remains of pre-Islamic Arabia. So just establishing the fact that this is well-known issue. Here in this book, this is Islam by Caesar Farah, PhD here. I believe that's his name. Anyway, yeah, Caesar Farah in his book Islam concludes his discussion of the pre-Islamic meaning of Allah by saying, there is no reason, therefore, to accept the idea that Allah passed to the Muslims from Christians or Jews. So what he's saying is that this word Allah, or as a reference to a general reference to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or the God of the Christians as well, that this didn't pass. This is a uniquely Arabic reference to a particular deity that they worshiped before Muhammad at the Kaaba in Mecca. So he goes on to say, according to Middle East scholar E.M. Wary, whose translation of the Quran is still used today, in pre-Islamic times, Allah worship as well as the worship of Baal were both astral religions, in that they involve the worship of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Now, I want to read that again, because we need to get a hold of that. According to Middle East scholar E.M. Wary, whose translation of the Quran is still used today, in pre-Islamic times, Allah worship, as well as the worship of Baal, who was the supreme god of the Canaanites and all these different ones out there, were both astral religions in that they involved the worship of the sun, the moon, and the stars, the comprehensive commentary on the Quran. So this is, again, pretty clear. And we're going to see it in archaeology and in their symbols. Let's look at this right here, some archaeological discoveries. Up top you see Hubal, the chief idol of Mecca, is linked to Baal, also known as Tammuz. In ancient Arabia, the sun god was viewed as a female goddess and the moon as the male god, as has been pointed out by many scholars as Alfred Giluim, or however you say his name. The moon god was called by various names, one of which was Allah. The name Allah was used as the personal name of the moon god in addition to other titles that could be given to him. Allah, the moon god. Now listen to this. This was what was believed back then, and this is, we're going to show that Muhammad, this is proof that Muhammad knew that Allah was the moon god, because Allah, the moon god, was married to the sun goddess, and together they produced three goddesses who were called the daughters of Allah. These three goddesses were called Al-lat, Al-Uzza and Manat. The daughters of Allah, along with Allah and the sun goddess, were viewed as high gods. That is, they were viewed as being at the top of the pantheon of the Arabian deities. Now, I'm going to show you in a minute, but these moon gods here and their daughters, Muhammad mentions in the Quran, and then later he removed it from the Quran. These are known as the Satanic verses, when he referred to these three daughters of Allah by these specific names and said that they were the exalted birds of intercession, right? Cranes. But yeah, it's crazy. But then later he had to take that out. But as you see, in these ancient artifacts that were found, Hubal, linked to Baal, you see what? The crescent moon and the sun god. You see it right there. There it is. And this bottom picture is from ancient Babylon. And it's interesting. This is the god Sin or Nana. And look, the three women, the three daughters, the moon. So this actually, Allah can be traced back to Babylonian, Sumerian gods and goddesses as well. So let's keep going here. We got a lot to cover. All right. And that's what I was mentioning just a minute ago, is Muhammad's satanic verses in the Quran, where he finally admits that it was Satan that spoke through him and caused him to put this in the Quran, and so he took it out later. But anyway, Muhammad's satanic verses in the Quran, these infamous verses in the Quran where Muhammad was said to have been inspired by Satan concerning three of the idols worshipped by the Arabs, and was later said to be abrogated or taken out of the Quran. Muhammad was said to have said one day to the Quraysh. Now the Quraysh were the tribe of Arabs that lived around Mecca in that area, that he was trying to convert to his religion from their worship of all these different gods, and particularly, again, the gods of Allah and his three daughters, the goddesses. And he was trying to convert them, and he wasn't being successful. So what does he do? He says this, he kind of gives in and compromises with them. Because remember now, the big point of Islam is there's only one God, Allah. Muhammad is his prophet. You don't worship anything else. But Muhammad did this right here. He said, do you see Al-lat and Al-Uzza and Manat and the third idol besides? They are the sublime birds, and their intercession is desirable indeed. So this was actually originally in the Quran. The famous traditionalist Tabari wrote, when the Quraysh, the tribe around Mecca, heard these verses, they were full with great joy, and they prostrate themselves, Muslims and non-Muslims. I translate from French, please excuse my English. The two last sentences were abrogated after a while because they were in contradiction with the unity of God and were replaced by, what shall you have male progeny and God female? This were indeed an unfair partition. So just the fact that Muhammad actually mentions these three daughters, and there's much more to this. I could spend a whole class just on the Satanic verses in the Quran, where he finally had to admit that Satan tricked him and spoke through him. Well, I'm going to just tell you, Satan tricked him and spoke through him the whole time, right? Right, but let's just keep going here. Again, here you see the Encyclopedia of World Mythology and Legend records, along with Allah, however, they worshipped a host of lesser gods and the daughters of Allah. It is well-known fact, archaeologically speaking, that the crescent moon was the symbol of the worship of the moon god both in Arabia and throughout the Middle East in pre-Islamic times. Archaeologists have excavated numerous statues and hieroglyphic inscriptions in which the crescent moon was seated on the top of the head of the deity to symbolize the worship of the moon god. Interesting, it says, while the moon was generally worshipped as a female deity in the ancient Near East, the Arabs viewed it as a male deity. So here you have some, there's the top of a mosque with the crescent moon there. Here's the connections, but it couldn't be more clear. The moon god of Mesopotamia. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerian god Nana, named Sin by the Akkadians, was worshipped in particular in Ur of the Chaldees, where he was the chief god of the city, and also in the city of Haran in Syria, which had close religious links with Ur. The Ugaritic text, I should say, have shown that there a moon deity was worshipped under the name of Kusu. On the monuments of the god is represented by the symbol of the crescent moon. Now, do you see that right there? That's from ancient Sumeria, the symbol of the crescent moon. At Hazor in Palestine, a small Canaanite shrine of late Bronze Age was discovered, which contained a basalt stele depicting two hands lifted as if in prayer to a crescent moon, indicating that the shrine was dedicated to the moon god. So if you have a hard time seeing, there it is right there, and you have the sun there in the middle, and then down here is where they found the shrine. There's the moon god Hubal or Allah, and there's the two hands again right there worshiping the crescent moon. So the moon god of Mesopotamia is pretty clear. I'll keep going through this here. Got a lot to cover today. So as you see, of course, here on the left, this is the symbol of Islam, the crescent moon and the star or the sun. It says they worship the worship of stellar deities instead of Yahweh, the God of the Bible, God of creation, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, was always a temptation faced by the Israelites. The Quraysh, the tribe into which Muhammad was born, was particularly devoted to Allah, the moon god, especially to Allah's three daughters, who were viewed as intercessors between the people and Allah. The worship of the three goddesses, Al-lat, Al-Uzza and Manat, played a significant role in the worship at the Kaaba in Mecca. The first two daughters of Allah had names which were feminine forms of Allah. The literal Arabic name of Muhammad's father was Abd Allah. His uncle's name was Obeid Allah. These names reveal personal devotion that Muhammad's pagan family had to the worship of Allah, the moon god. Again, these are all historical facts acknowledged and admitted within Islam itself. These are not hidden things. Of course, I think some of your average Muslims don't know this. Of course, here's the flag of your first Islamic nation ever in modern times. Pakistan was your first Islamic state. And what do they have? What's their symbol there? I mean, is it an accident? I mean, it would be like, us creating a flag here for Fire and Grace Church and putting, a cross on it and saying, no, we're not Christian. That doesn't make any sense, does it? Well, let's keep going, if it will. Of course, here's the Kaaba. Well, let me go back. It's actually delaying. I don't know why it's delaying, but okay. Anyway, here's a picture, of course, of Mecca. This is the Kaaba cube. This, of course, right here in the corner here, it may be hard to see, is where they have the black stone that they kiss and bow before and worship that allegedly fell from the sky. But anyway, history proves conclusively that before Islam came into existence, the Sabians in Arabia worshipped the moon god Allah, who was married to the sun goddess. We have also seen that it was a matter of common practice to use the name of the moon god in personal names in Muhammad's tribe. That Allah was a pagan deity in pre-Islamic times is incontestable. And so we must ask ourselves the question, why was Muhammad's God named after a pagan deity in his own tribe? It is undeniable fact that an Allah idol was set up at the Kaaba along with the other idols of the time. The pagans prayed toward Mecca and the Kaaba because it was where their gods were stationed. It made sense to them to face in the direction of their God and pray since that's where he was. Since the idol of their moon god Allah was at Mecca, they prayed toward Mecca. And here they all are bowing before the Kaaba and the black stone, which is really just an outward, just obvious manifestation of idolatry that they say they forbid. It's just amazing, isn't it? But let's keep going. We got a lot to cover here. There we go. Demon possessed. Now we got to ask the question here. Of course, now it's easy for us to look at what Muhammad said, what Muhammad taught, what he did, how he lived his life as Christians and say this. But when you find out that his own mother and his wet nurse, his nanny basically, thought he was demon possessed as a child, this ought to make us pause for a moment, don't you think? So let's read this here. When Muhammad was a child, he was nursed by a Bedouin woman. And during this time, he had an experience with, well, let me back up. Why he was, why he was with the Bedouin woman, this is what they did. A lot of people say, some people have said, well, Muhammad's mother rejected him, but that wasn't the case. It was a lot of times when children were born, if they were born healthy and people lived in a city area or a more highly populated area, they would take the children out into the desert to be kind of raised away from the population so that they wouldn't get sick and die. It was really to try to protect the children from, the many different diseases and sicknesses and things that you could catch. So I don't know if it was, his mother rejecting him or just trying to protect him. I don't think it's fair to say she rejected him. But it's a fact that he was sent out and to be nursed and taken care of by a Bedouin woman out in the wilderness, in the desert regions away from the populated area of Mecca. But anyway, it says, when Muhammad was a child, he was nursed by a Bedouin woman. During this time, he had an experience with two men in white raiment or clothing. Here is where W.M. Watt's translation of Ibn Ishaq's biography of Muhammad, page 36, quote, "Two men in white clothes came to me," Muhammad said, "with a golden basin full of snow. They took me and split open my body and then took my heart and split it open and took it out from it a black clot, which they flung away. Then they washed my heart and my body with that snow until they made them pure." Now this event deeply disturbed the Bedouins, the shepherd nomadic people there, out there in the wilderness in the desert. And they returned Muhammad to his mother, and here's the story told by Muhammad's wet nurse, related in Gilliam's translation of Ibn Ishaq, page 72. Muhammad's friend's father, said to me, quote, "I'm afraid that this child has had a stroke, so take him back to his family before the result appears." She, Muhammad's mother, asked me what happened and gave me no peace until I told her. When she asked if I feared a demon had possessed him, I replied that I did. So the one raising him, it's a note that Muhammad's wet nurse believed he had been possessed by a demon. Now one would expect some degree of attachment between the two since she nursed him, so it's extraordinary that she would return him in those circumstances. Something very troubling occurred. And this is not unusual, as you're going to see this kind of strange behavior in Muhammad's life continued, especially when he allegedly encountered what he said was the spirit or the angel Gabriel. Now I'm just going to say flat out right now that Muhammad did not have an encounter with Gabriel whatsoever. All right, and we're going to see why. But anybody that came to me, if somebody came to me and told me they had an encounter with something that claimed to be an angel, and this is what happened, you immediately go, that's not an angel, that is an evil spirit deceiving you, because angels have never done this in the scriptures or to anybody that they've appeared to. So let's listen to Muhammad's account of when he allegedly was called to be a prophet and his encounter with Gabriel. It's pretty wild stuff. So here it is. Muhammad's alleged encounter with Gabriel. Now this is in the Hadith. This is in the Hadith of Bukhari. So this is, the Hadiths are just as accepted in Islam as the Quran. All right? In fact, sometimes more so. So here we have. Now this, Muhammad's experience in the cave, his call to prophethood, quoting from the Hadith of Bukhari 9.111, narrated by Aisha. Aisha was, I don't know if it was his second wife. I can't keep up with it. It wasn't his first wife, but Aisha's, we're going to get to her in a minute, but she's the one that Muhammad married when she was 6 and consummated the marriage when she was 9. And she was with him for a very long time. And Muhammad was illiterate, so she would sometimes recount his stuff. I mean, it's a sick, really Muhammad was a pedophile, but it's just a sick story here. But she, she's the one that recounts a lot of this stuff. So here, this is narrated by Aisha. It says, the commencement of the divine inspiration to Allah's apostle was in the form of good, righteous, true dreams in his sleep. He never had a dream, but that it came true like bright daylight. He used to go in seclusion, the cave of Hira, or Hira, however you say it, where he used to worship Allah alone, continuously for many days and nights. He used to take with him the journey food for that stay, and then come back to his wife, Khadijah. Now, Khadijah was his first wife. We'll talk about her later. To take his food, likewise again, for another period, to stay till suddenly the truth descended upon him while he was in the cave of Hira. The angel came to him in it and asked him to read. The prophet replied, I do not know how to read. The prophet added, the angel caught me forcefully. Now remember, this is forcefully, and pressed me so hard I could not bear it anymore. He then released me and again asked me to read. And I replied, I do not know how to read. Whereupon he caught me again and pressed me a second time till I could not bear it anymore. He then released me and asked me again to read. But then I replied, I do not know how to read, or what shall I read? Thereupon he caught me the third time and pressed me and then released me and said, read in the name of your Lord who has created all that exists. He created man from a clot. Read, and your Lord is most generous up to that which he knew not. Then Allah's apostle returned with inspiration. Now listen to this. His neck muscles twitching with terror till he entered upon Khadijah and said, "Cover me, cover me." They covered him till his fear was over. Then he said, "O Khadijah, what is wrong with me?" Then he told her everything that had happened and said, "I fear that something may happen to me." Khadijah said, "Never, but have the glad tidings, for by Allah, Allah will never disgrace you as you keep good relations with your kith and kin, speak the truth, help the poor and the destitute, serve your guests generously, assist the deserving and calamity afflicted ones." So basically Khadijah, which we're going to find out later, she was allegedly Christian. Some have said Roman Catholic, some have said Eastern Christian. Why she, encouraged this, of course. Now, just so you know, Khadijah was like 40 or in her 40s when she married Muhammad when he was like 25. All right, she was a wealthy businesswoman. It said that her father did not want her to marry Muhammad. But I think there's a true story behind this that a lot of people don't know about, but we'll get to that in a minute. But first of all, this is, and you can read other accounts of this with Muhammad's encounter with this spirit that claimed to be Gabriel. He said that he grabbed a hold of him so forcefully and so strongly that he thought he was going to crush him and kill him. He couldn't breathe. I mean, this was a violent, unsettling encounter that he had. And you can see that that's not out of line when you see how he came back in fear and trembling and twitching. These are not signs of the peace of God or the love of God or the gentleness and mercy of God. This is clearly demonic. Okay? Now remember, the Apostle Paul said that don't be surprised that Satan himself will transform himself and appear as an angel of light sometimes. What's really eerie is how similar this is, again, to the story of, Joseph Smith claiming the angel Moroni appeared to him to give him these golden tablets. Remember what Paul said in Galatians, "If we or an angel come and preach any other gospel to you, let him be accursed." Now remember, Paul wrote that in AD 50 or 49, somewhere in that time period in Galatians. And look, Muhammad didn't come along till, the 600s AD. So we're talking about hundreds of years later after Jesus, after the true apostles, after the true gospel, after the true Messiahs come. And here you've got an angel appearing to a man claiming he's going to give him revelation. As you see, this revelation begins to go against everything written in the Bible. Okay, it begins to go against the Jews, the Christians. It denies the deity of Jesus, God being that he was God in the flesh, denies that he died on the cross for sins, that he rose from the dead, denies the triune nature of God. So it is pretty clear that this was not Gabriel. All right, now let's go to the next slide here. But not a lot of people know this because they just don't look into Islam. They just think, oh, it's just another religion. But you got to look into the beginning of things. You got to know how things start. So after this encounter with Gabriel, Muhammad wants to commit suicide. Now, is this a fruit of an encounter with God? Is that what happened to Moses when God manifested himself at the burning bush? Did Moses come back scared to death and want to commit suicide? No. All right. That didn't happen to the Apostle Paul when he encountered Jesus on the road to Damascus. It says here, but after a few days, Waraqah, which was one of Khadijah's relatives that had kind of helped train and mentor Muhammad, and there's a thought that he may have been a Roman Catholic. But anyway, he died, And it says, the divine inspiration also paused for a while, and the prophet became so sad or depressed, as we have heard, that he intended several times to throw himself from the top of high mountains. And every time he went up the top of a mountain in order to throw himself down, Gabriel would appear before him, or this spirit would say, "O Muhammad, you are indeed Allah's apostle in truth," whereupon his heart would become quiet and he would calm down and return home. And whenever the period of coming of the inspiration used to become long, he would go and do as before. But when he used to reach the top of a mountain, Gabriel would appear to him and say unto him what he had said before. So, there's a slight number of variations related by different people describing Muhammad's visitation by a spirit, identifying himself as the angel Gabriel. These stories don't always agree with each other in perfect detail, but on the whole, you can get a composite picture. It can be drawn of Muhammad's initial experience with the spirit and his subsequent reactions. Now let's keep going here. Woe is me, poet or possessed? Now think about this. Poet or possessed? This is a question Muhammad asked. Look at this. He said, "So I, Muhammad, read it, and he, Gabriel, departed from me, and I awoke from my sleep, and it was though these words were written on my heart." Now Tabari, an Islamic writer here, says, "Now none of God's creatures were more hateful to me than the ecstatic poet or man possessed. I could not even look at them. I thought, woe is me, poet or possessed? Poet or possessed?" He asked of himself. He says, "Never shall the Quraysh say this of me," meaning his tribe of people around Mecca. He said, "I don't want these people saying, is this man a poet? Is he demon possessed?" He said, "No," and he's asking this of himself. And he says, "I will go to the top of the mountain and throw myself down, that I may kill myself and gain rest." So I went forth to do so, and then when I was midway on the mountain, I heard the voice from heaven say, "O Muhammad, thou art the apostle of God, and I am Gabriel." So the visitations from the Spirit continued. Then they stopped for a time, believed to have been 6 months to 3 years. When this happened, Tabari, volume 6, page 76, records, "The inspiration ceased to come to the messenger of God for a while, and he was deeply grieved. He began to go to the tops of mountain crags in order to fling himself from them, but every time he reached the summit of a mountain, Gabriel appeared to him and said, 'You are the prophet of God.' Thereupon his anxiety would subside and he would come back to himself." So this spirit that, and also in Tabari, let's read this in the blue here, the pre-Islamic Arabs believed in the demon of poetry, and they thought that a great poet was directly inspired by demons. So here, let's just think about this for a minute. Here he has this encounter that's violent and terrifying physically. I mean, he feels like he's going to die, like this thing's going to kill him, and it keeps telling him to read, and he can't read. This is a terrifying thing. He comes back, his neck twitching. He comes back, just a wreck. And then, of course, from this point on, many, many times he went to go kill himself over this, because of this encounter. I don't know about you, but in our day and age, anybody this unstable would be locked up somewhere, right? Or we need to send them to a mental institution. Well, I don't believe that was his problem. And a lot of these people we send to mental institutions, that's not their problem. It's demonic. It's demonic possession. It's demonic influence. It's demonic control. You really almost, at this point, feel sorry for the guy. I mean, you really do. Because I really believe he was just a victim of his environment that he grew up in, that he lived in, of idolatry, of just insanity. And then, of course, he's illiterate, so he's not educated. And so it's easy for this spirit to come along and deceive him and make him think that he's something. But again, the devil always kind of shows his hand a little bit, doesn't he? He always kind of tips his hand. So to me, it's pretty evident, but it gets even more evident. we're going to keep going here. So this explains, go down to the green part here, this explains why Muhammad thought he was demon-possessed or influenced by demon. The Quran in many places reads like poetry. In Muhammad at Mecca, page 40-41, there are also references that document Muhammad's suicidal thoughts. Quote, he, Muhammad, said, I had been meditating, throwing myself from a mountain crag, but while I was so meditating, he appeared to me and said, O Muhammad, I am Gabriel, and thou art the messenger of God. As Zuhuri, or however you say that, said, there was a gap for a time in the revelation to the messenger of God, and he was very sorrowful. He started going early to tops of mountains to throw himself down from there. But whenever he reached the summit of a mountain, Gabriel would appear to him and say, thou art a prophet. However you view this event, it's undeniable that something extraordinary happened to Muhammad in the cave, and he was deeply distressed by it. And listen, this is what we do. We know a tree by its fruit. That's what Jesus said, right? Matthew chapter 7. You know the tree by its fruit. So, look at this. Just think about this right here. This fruit of this encounter. Remember, the entire Quran, the entire religion of Islam is based on this encounter. It's based on this relationship that Muhammad had with this spirit that claimed to be the angel Gabriel, but was not. And so when you look at this and you realize it, you go, wow, if this is corrupt and satanic and demonic from the beginning, then it's pretty easy to see. This is not a continuation or the next revelation of religion, from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But like I said, you know a tree by its fruit. So it says, from his youth, some people thought Muhammad was demon-possessed. Muhammad's encounter with Gabriel deeply disturbs him, and he thinks he is demon-possessed. He decides to commit suicide, but is stopped when the Spirit appears and says he is an apostle. Later, when these visitations become infrequent, he again goes and tries to commit suicide. Each time the Spirit intervenes. As time went on, people continued to think that Muhammad was demon-inspired. And then it goes on to say here, isn't it bizarre that following this experience, Muhammad became suicidal? Not only that, but as time goes on, he continues to be suicidal. All the while, he wonders deep down if he is demon-possessed. Does this follow from a real experience with God? And just to throw up some people in the Bible who had an experience with God. Adam, Abraham, David, Mary, Noah, Moses, Isaiah, Paul in Acts. Any of these supernatural, powerful, awesome experiences with God, did anybody become suicidal? Did anybody become depressed? Did anybody become, so disturbed that they couldn't function and wanted to throw themselves off a cliff? No. Again, we judge the tree by the fruit, right? Muhammad needed deliverance from this demon, is what he needed. But instead, the Spirit had found somebody it was going to use to deceive the world. Many beings. Let's keep going here. Now, listen to this. Here's some interesting facts. And I quoted one of these things a minute ago, but let's just read this right here. It says it's interesting, and again, just so you know, a lot of this good information came from answering-islam.org. Really good website, full of information. Also, just so you guys know, here we go. Let's go ahead and put this up, camera right here, I guess, and I'll show them. This is a great book I've been reading. You see this right here? I don't know if y'all can see it. We'll get kind of close there. But that's The People versus Muhammad, Psychological Analysis by Shinlin, J.K. Shinlin, there. Good book. It really lays it out as well. I have several good books, really good books on Islam. But anyway, he says here, it's an interesting biblical reference that bears on Muhammad is Jeremiah 23:15 and 23:34. In these verses, God reveals his judgment on false prophets. Now listen to this. This is Jeremiah 23:15. Therefore, this is what the Lord Almighty says concerning the prophets. I will make them eat bitter food and drink poisoned water, because from the prophets of Jerusalem ungodliness has spread throughout the land. 23:34, if a prophet or priest or anyone else claims this is the oracle of the Lord, I will punish that man and his household. This verse reflects upon the events in Muhammad's life. Muhammad died from poisoning, and all his male children died when they were very young. Wow. I had never made this connection right here. So this was very interesting. Of course, the verse I quoted a minute ago, 2 Corinthians 11:14. I don't know why this is cutting off part of the slide, but it says, no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades or transforms himself into an angel of light. In Galatians 1:8, but if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel other than the one we have preached to you, let him be eternally condemned. Note here that the angel appeared to the false prophet of Mormonism, Joseph Smith, and gave him a different gospel. I find the parallel between Smith and Muhammad strong. Just as Smith was directed by an angel with a different message, so too Muhammad was directed by an angel with a different message, a different gospel other than what the apostles preached in the New Testament. So this is very important. I want everybody to get these things down. Just as we're not going to be able to cover everything about Islam today. But something you need to understand, number one, is that Allah is a direct name of a pagan deity that was in Mecca. It was an idol, and it was the moon god. It has nothing to do with Yahweh, Elohim, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There is no connection whatsoever. And anybody in recent years, we had Brian Houston of Hillsongs stand in his pulpit. The man has a ministry that has tens of thousands of people in Australia and then all over the world. And he says Christians and Muslims worship the same God. Now, that is so either woefully ignorant or you're just truly compromising to try to make everybody love you, or you're just part of the plan. But that's just sick. Let me make it very clear. Christians and Jews, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Elohim, Yahweh, Jehovah, El Shaddai, is not the same God of Muhammad. Allah is not the same. And you can make the case, and we may get to some of that, you can make the case that Allah is really also Satan. But let's just keep going here. We know for one thing's for sure, he's a false god. Now let's look at some more aspects of this spirit that claimed to be Gabriel. I was just blown away because as I study and refresh on different things like Islam, or like we did Seventh-day Adventist or Jehovah's Witnesses, sometimes you think you know some things and you remember things, and then you go back and you refresh and you're like, wow, I didn't remember that, and I haven't seen that before. But this right here, I didn't know some of this, but these are, whenever you see Bukhari, you see this Bukhari? That's the Hadiths. And remember, the sacred writings of Islam, the two most sacred, the Quran and the Hadiths. So when you see Bukhari, this is like, this is still Bible to Muslims. So let's see, who was the spirit that called himself Gabriel? Muhammad had many encounters with the spirit that identified himself as Gabriel, as we've seen. In some of these encounters, odd things came out about its nature. Here are a number of references that show the circumstances surrounding him are indeed bizarre. Most of these from the Hadith of Bukhari, which is the second most important book in Sunni Islam. I will not provide the quotes in full because some are too long. However, anyone, this is a while back, but anyone on the internet could download Bukhari's Hadith for free from the Islamic Resource Library if they want to verify my quotes and the context of the Hadith. Non-Muslims called Gabriel Satan. Bukhari 2:25. Gabriel did not come to the prophet for some time, and so one of the Quraysh women said, his Satan has deserted him. That's pretty strong. All right, Bukhari 8:173, Gabriel is the Holy Spirit, question mark here. Narrated by Abdu Salama bin Abdar Rahman bin Auf. Woohoo! That was fun. Anyway, he says, I beseech you by Allah to tell me, did you hear Allah's apostle saying, O Hassan, rely on behalf of Allah's apostle, O Allah, support him, Hassan, with the Holy Spirit, Gabriel. And Abu Hurairah, whatever, said yes. Aisha could not see Gabriel, but, that's neither here nor there. Let's look at more of this. To me, this is where it gets interesting. Gabriel said he wouldn't go into a house with a dog or a picture. And now I understand. I've been told by, people from the Middle East, like I had a long conversation with an Iraqi Kurd who is a Christian, and he told me about how the Muslims over there, particularly in Iraq and Afghanistan and those areas, hate dogs, man. They mistreat them, they hate them. He was scared to death of the dogs in our backyard because dogs are so mistreated that they just will attack people to protect themselves. And so now I know. I didn't know this before, but so it came from Muhammad's spirit, Gabriel there. So that's in Bukhari 450. Gabriel doesn't know genetics. Bukhari 546 says, when Abdullah bin Salim heard the arrival of the prophet at Medina, he came to him and said, I'm going to ask you about three things which nobody knows except a prophet. What is the first portent of the hour? What will be the first meal taken by the people of paradise? And why does a child resemble its father? And why does it resemble its maternal uncle? Allah's apostle said, Gabriel has just now told me of the answers. As for the resemblance of a child to its parents, if a man has sexual intercourse with his wife and gets discharged first, the child will resemble the father. And if a woman gets discharged first, the child will resemble her. Now, that couldn't be more stupid than anything I've heard in my life, but, that's Gabriel right there, right? Muhammad's Gabriel anyway. Doesn't seem to know genetics and know what he's talking about. Right? Anyway, let's just move on here. There's so much we can cover, but this one I found very interesting. I learned this yesterday and did not know this, but that this spirit Gabriel urged Muhammad to massacre a Jewish tribe. Now, this is pretty clear right here because it says Gabriel was responsible for the massacre and enslavement of a Jewish tribe. Gabriel urges Muhammad to go and attack the Jews of Bani Qurayza. This action ended with about 800 prisoners of war being massacred and thousands of Jewish women and children being enslaved by Muhammad. Bukhari 5:448, when the prophet returned from the battle of Al-Kanda trench or whatever, and laid down his arms and took a bath, Gabriel came to him, and while Gabriel was shaking the dust off his head, said, you have laid down the arms? Question mark. By Allah, I have not laid them down. Go out to them and attack them. The prophet said, where? Gabriel ported to Bani Qurayza. So Allah's apostle went to them and besieged them, and then they surrendered to the prophet's judgment, but he directed them to Sad to give his verdict concerning them. Sad said, I give my judgment that their warriors should be killed, their women and children should be taken as captives, and their property distributed. Again, other Muslims failed to recognize Gabriel regarding the massacre of the Jews. Here is the quote from The Life of Muhammad, page 461. Note here that these men also are recognizing this Gabriel as the same person. So there was a person that they thought was doing this, but that may have even been impersonating Gabriel too, that a person got involved in this. It's some crazy stuff. But that right there, and if you read about that massacre, which I won't get into today, it was quite brutal. Just crazy. Of course, there was one time, it says here that Gabriel, the spirit Gabriel, prayed for Muhammad to be healed, but Muhammad was not healed. Isn't that something? An angel can't get you healed. What's going on? Right? Let's look at this. Here we go. The apostle of Allah fell ill, and Gabriel chanted on him, saying, "In the name of Allah, I chant on to ward off from you everything that harms you, and to ward off you against every envier and from every evil eye, and Allah will heal you." And then, of course, he was not. But let's review. Non-Muslims identified Gabriel as a Satan. Muhammad can see Gabriel, but others can't. Gabriel makes scientific mistakes about genetics. Gabriel is responsible for the massacre of 800 Jewish men and the enslavement of their women and children. Gabriel prays to God for Muhammad to be healed, and Muhammad isn't healed. When people do see Gabriel, he appears as a person they know, or so they are told, but not as an angel. So, bizarre, evil, dark, to say the least. Now, let's just look. Is Satan and his demon spirits, his evil spirits, behind Islam? Well, it's really easy to tell. Again, we know the tree by its fruits. Right? So look at here. Satan and the persecution of Christians. Revelation 12, there was war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but he was not strong enough till they lost their place in heaven. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to make war against the rest of her offspring, those who obey the commandments, God's commandments, and hold the testimony of Jesus. John 8:44, he said, "You belong to your father, the devil. You want to carry out your father's desire. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth. There's no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of it." Matthew 24:11, "Many false prophets will arise and deceive many people." John 6:2, this is 16:2 rather. "In fact, the time is coming when anyone who kills you will think he is offering a service to God. They will do these things because they have not known the Father or me." So, from the above, we see that Satan's currently making war on the saints. He will use false prophets to mislead people. Some of these false prophets will have doctrines that allow their followers to kill Christians. I mean, it's pretty plain. Jesus described these things. Here's some of the quotes from the Quran on Christianity. Not pleasant, but here they are, right? There are many references in the Quran and the Hadith that addresses Christianity. He says, what I want to focus on here are the latest statements on Christianity made by Muhammad. Remember, Muhammad, one of the things they teach in Islam is that if there are earlier things that Muhammad said and there seem to be superseded or changed later on, you take the later things, okay? So these are later quotes of Muhammad right here. And this is why you have jihad. This is why you have, people like ISIS and all these other groups rising up and exterminating Christians in the Middle East because of this stuff. Quran 5:51, believers, he's talking about, Muslims, take neither the Jews nor the Christians for your friends. So don't even be friends with them. That doesn't sound very nice, right? Quran 9:28 through 30, fight against such as those to whom the scriptures were given as believe neither in God nor the last days, who do not forbid what God and his apostles have forbidden, do not embrace the true faith until they pay tribute out of hand and are utterly subdued. The Jews say Ezra is the son of God, while the Christians say the Messiah is the son of God. Such there are their assertions by which they imitate the infidels of old. God confound them, how perverse they are. So again, very clearly against Jews and Christians. Here's some of the Hadith quotes here. Again, this is Bukhari 9:64. Narrated Ali, whenever I tell you a narration from Allah's messenger, by Allah, I would rather fall down from the sky than ascribe a false statement to him. But if I tell you something between me and you, not a hadith, then it was indeed a trick. I may say these things to cheat my enemy. No doubt I heard Allah's messenger saying, during the last days there will appear some young, foolish people who will say the best words, but their faith will not go beyond their throats. They will leave the faith. They will go out from their religion as an arrow goes out of the game. So wherever you find them, kill them, for whosoever kills them shall have reward on the day of resurrection. So this is where he gives instructions to kill those who leave Islam. All right? So this is directly from Ali, who said, this is what I heard Muhammad say. All right? That's what the hadiths are about. Muhammad asked God to curse the Christians and the Jews. This is Bukhari 1:427, narrated by Aisha and Abdullah bin Abbas. When the last moment of the life of Allah's apostle came, he started putting his camisa on his face. I don't even know what that is. When he felt hot and short of breath, he took it off his face and said, may Allah curse the Jews and Christians, for they built the places of worship at the graves of their prophets. The prophet was warning Muslims of what those had done. So may Allah curse the Jews and the Christians. I think that's pretty clear, right? And this is why there is such persecution of Christians by Muslims all over the world. They can say religion of peace all they want to. It's religion of hate Christians, hate Jews, persecute, oppress, kill, rob, steal, plunder, rape, whatever is necessary. Modern persecution of Christians. How does Islam relate to Christianity today? If one studies the situation for the Christians living under Islamic governments, we get a picture of oppression. Here are some facts concerning Christians in Islamic land. Pakistan. Pakistan has laws that forbid blaspheming Muhammad. Recently, a Christian was under the death sentence because of a trumped-up charge of blasphemy of Muhammad. Last year, a mob of 30,000 Muslims attacked the only predominantly Christian village in Pakistan. They destroyed churches, robbed and destroyed businesses, kidnapped and raped Christian girls, and destroyed many people's homes. These people are sick, demonically possessed, but they're following the exact example of their leader, Muhammad. Don't let it. Isn't it amazing that Western governments are making excuses for these people and ignoring this? Let's look. That's Pakistan. Egypt. Christian churches are frequently attacked and destroyed by Muslims in Egypt. Christians are targeted by Muslims and killed. Last year, about 70 Christians were murdered by Muslims in Egypt. Muslims are now attacking Christians in their churches and shooting them. Saudi Arabia. Recently, Saudis have arrested many Christians who meet in small house churches. These people are jailed, tortured, and some are executed. Saudi law dictates the death penalty for anyone converting to a faith other than Islam. This is an entire country, Saudi Arabia. Indonesia, Muslims, mobs have destroyed over 50 churches in the last few years. Several Christians have been killed in these attacks, and we could go on. Nigeria, with Boko Haram. This article was written before ISIS and Al-Qaeda and everything that's gone on in Syria and Iraq. And here's an article recently from 2017 by Raymond Ibrahim. If you love Jesus, then die like Jesus. Muslim persecution of Christians, November 2016. This is where it is, folks. This is reality right here. This is what's going on. It's been shown that Satan desires to make war upon the church. Satan uses people as his agents. From the earliest days of Muhammad's life, people thought he was possessed or affected by demons. Muhammad's initial experience with the angel caused him to believe that he was demon-possessed. He became suicidal. His inner doubts remained with him for a long time. Even the Quran contains replies to people's comments about his demonic affliction. Further, this angel, or this evil spirit, we should say, knowledge and characteristics are questionable. Satan used Muhammad as a pawn and Islam as a tool to attack the people of God. As Muhammad grew in power, he used violence to subdue those that disagreed with him. He denied the sonship of Jesus, making him an antichrist and a denier of other key doctrines of Christianity. Muhammad eventually urged his followers to oppress Christians and instituted laws that deny people basic human rights. Today in Muslim countries, Christians are victimized by those laws. Many of them have murdered, executed, or been oppressed for their faith. If a Muslim converts to Christianity, he is under a death sentence for apostatizing. In his last few hours of life, Muhammad asked Allah to curse Christians. Real Islam is a weapon Satan uses to make war upon God and his people. These are indisputable facts. Now, I'm just going to touch on this here for a minute. But this is another indisputable fact about Islam. And that is, they teach that grown men can marry little children, little girls. All right? Now let's read this and then try to comprehend. Here's this little introduction. And listen, this is confirmed by many sources. I've talked about this for years. But I love this introduction. He says, picture this historical setting. A 49-year-old man asked his best friend if he could have his permission to marry his 6-year-old daughter. His friend agrees. The man then visits his best friend's house and speaks with the 6-year-old daughter. Her parents watch as he proposes marriage to the child. He is serious. He wants to marry the little girl and is asking for her consent. The little child says nothing. She only stares at him in silence. The Islamic source materials state that Muhammad proposed marriage to Aisha when she was 6. He assumed her silence constituted her consent. Some 2 to 3 years later, just after he had fled to Medina, he consummated his marriage with her. He was 52 and she was 9 when he had sex with her. This occurred prior to Aisha's first menses, and by Islam's legal definition, Aisha was still considered a child. Islam teaches that a child enters adulthood at the beginning of puberty. Though this is scientifically inaccurate, the onset of puberty does not equal adulthood, but that's another story. The bottom line is Muhammad, the creator of Islam, revered by his followers, had sex with a child. Worse, Muhammad's actions and teachings on marriage established an Islamic precedent, and Islamic law allows female children to be married off and engaged in sex provided they are able to handle a man's penis. Quran 65:4, as will be shown, this leads to physical and psychological damage to the child. Now this is, again, you know what? I can't even, I'm reading that and I'm getting sicker by the moment. But do you understand that this is going on in the world? Why do you think that there are Muslim countries today that allow this? I mean, I read a story, and I know this is sick. I hope your children are not around if you're watching this live. But I read a story of a man that married this little girl in one of these Muslim countries. A Muslim man married this little girl, and basically the sexual encounter that evening killed her. These are some sick people. It is a demon-possessed, demonic, satanic religion. How it can be even be compared to Christianity in any form or fashion. How Muhammad can be even compared to Jesus as a prophet is the most ridiculous nonsense that's going on in this world right now. I could go through this. All the source material is here about the Quran and the Hadith and the teachings of Islam, about marriage with little girls that hadn't even reached puberty. It's sick. It's just sick. And there's no way to candy coat this. Now, of course, the Muslims try to do this. When you bring this up, boy, they immediately start trying. Oh, no. Well, she wasn't really 9. She was older than that. No. All the Islamic source material on it. She was 6. Marriage consummated at 9. Look, this is sick. This is just sick. I mean, you can read it, but I'll just tell you that she's married to Muhammad at 6. At 9 years old, he starts having sex with her, and she's in the house between 9 and 10 as a wife of Muhammad at 52, 3, and 4. She's still playing with dolls. I don't know. God. How could anyone follow this man as a prophet? These are facts. Now let's go to this. I almost didn't bring this up, but I'm going to bring this up because I think it's an interesting point. And I really need to move on because I can feel my blood pressure starting to rise and my blood's starting to boil. But, isn't it interesting at what we see, really, if you think about it, let's just look at it. You see a common problem or a common evil in both Islam, the Roman Catholic Church, that's a false religion. It's not a Christian church whatsoever. And in Satanism. What's a common thread between Islam, the Roman Catholic Church, and Satanism? Pedophilia. Raping, molesting, having sex with little kids. Let me tell you what that shows. It's the same spirit operating and controlling all three systems. Islam, Roman Catholicism, Satanism, the occult. Same devil, same Satan, just different face, different mask on. But the reason I bring this up, there was this right here. You see this it's like this cartoon, The Prophet, Alberto Part 6. And the man beside there, that's his cartoon rendition by Jack Chick. This was done years ago, but that's Alberto Rivera. Now, Alberto Rivera is an ex-Jesuit priest. Now, I know if you look up Alberto Rivera on the internet, there's a lot of people that try to debunk him, okay? But I remember getting a hold, and I remember when he was still alive. And I remember watching him be interviewed. I remember reading his articles. And of course, he brought with him, when he left the Vatican and when he left the Jesuit order, and there was a whole story behind it, that he came and he shared this with Jack Chick, who was, at the time a fundamental Baptist, minister and cartoonist, and Jack Chick's famous for producing gospel tracts, and we still use Jack Chick tracts. They're some of the best tracts, gospel tracts that you can use to pass out. He was an excellent cartoonist. He was an artist. But there's no doubt that Alberto Rivera was truly a Jesuit before, Jesuit trained. He came out with the credentials that he could only get from the Vatican. And the things that he knew and the things that he shared, it is clear he became a clear voice for Protestant evangelical Christianity, that he spoke vehemently and decisively and without compromise against the Roman Catholic Church, and he exposed many secrets that he was taught by top Jesuits while spending time in a place that you and I can't go, called the Vatican catacombs and libraries and everything underneath the Vatican. Now, what this man says, and that's what we're going to discuss here, his story is that he was taught that it was Roman Catholic priests that went out to recruit an Arab to be a religious leader, to try to bring the Muslim people who were into all these worshiping all these different idols and deities, to try to bring them under the Roman Catholic Church. And that's why it is believed that they recruited Muhammad's first wife, that she was like 40 or in her 40s, and he's 25, that they recruited her to seduce Muhammad, to be an influence on him. And it is known that she was that she was a Christian. Okay? Now, some say that she was Roman Catholic, some argue that she wasn't, but Alberto Rivera, the ex-Jesuit, says that she was recruited by Rome to recruit Muhammad and to train him. And that Wakara, the relative of Khadijah, was also a Roman Catholic agent to help prepare him. And that it was their mentoring, tutoring, and persuasion that got him, that encouraged him and to become a leader among the Arabs and a religious leader. Now, what he says is basically, and what I believe, is that Muhammad began to do this and then kind of took it his own way. Now, again, people can say, well, I don't believe Alberto Rivera's story, right? That's fair. Anybody can say that. So I don't know if I believe the ex-Jesuit. Maybe he just came out and wanted to make Islam look bad. So, he's connecting Rome and the Jesuits. But let's remember something. That the Roman Catholic Church is the Mystery Babylon. It is the great whore that sits on 7 hills. It is the one clothed in scarlet and purple. It is the one who reigns over the kings of the earth. And it says that she is the mother, now think about this, she's the mother of abominations. She's the mother of other harlots, and she is drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. And then it goes on to say that she will be held guilty of all the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. Now, Rome and the Inquisitions killed many Christians for centuries, right? But so has Islam since Muhammad's time. But isn't it interesting, if there is a connection between the Vatican, Roman Catholic Church, and Islam, and that Islam was really, that the Catholic Church was really the mother of Islam, that she birthed it, and though it rebelled against her, because what Alberto, the former Jesuit, said was that the Rome wanted control of the Middle East so that they could get Jerusalem. They saw it very important to get hold of Jerusalem, and they were going to use the Arabs as their foot soldiers to get control of Jerusalem. But of course, the Arabs went their own way. right? Didn't quite work out the way they wanted it to work out. But let's just say, well, I don't believe Alberto Rivera. Fair enough. Well, let's ask this question. Why is Mary so exalted in Islam? Not Khadijah, not Aisha, not even Muhammad's mother, not his nurse. No woman is so lifted up in Islam as Mary. And now look at this. Mary, the mother of Jesus, who they call Isa, holds a singular exalted place in Islam as the only woman named in the Quran. Do you see that? Mary, the mother of Jesus, is the only woman named in the Quran. Not only is she named in the Quran, she has a whole book in the Quran by her name. And let's go back to this. She's the only woman named in the Quran, which refers to her 70 times in the Quran. Now, well, let's keep going. Let's just read this. So Mary is named 70 times and explicitly identifies her as the greatest of all women. So think about this. The Quran says Mary's the greatest of all women. That's the mother of Jesus. If you were trying to exalt yourself as the greatest apostle, the final apostle, or prophet, what about your mother? What about Muhammad's mother? Why wasn't she the greatest? Right? Isn't this bizarre? It's like you have this, almost sounds like Roman Catholicism inserted in the middle of this thing called Islam and the Quran. It goes on to say that, again, the Quran mentions Mary 70 times, explicitly identifies her as the greatest of all women, stating with the reference to the angelic salutation during the Annunciation, "O Mary, God has chosen you and purified you. He has chosen you above all women of creation." In the Quran, her story is related in 3 Meccan chapters, 19, 20, 23, all 4 and 4 Median, or however you say it, chapters 3, 4, 6, 66, and the 19th chapter of Scripture titled Mary is named after her. The Quran refers to Mary more than the New Testament. Refers to Mary more than the New Testament. It says, according to the Quran, divine grace surrounded Mary from birth, and as a young woman, she received a message from God through the archangel Gabriel that God had chosen her, purified her, and had preferred her above all the women of the world. This event, according to the same narrative, was followed by the annunciation of a child who was to be miraculously conceived by her through the intervention of the divine spirit while she was still a virgin, whose name would be Jesus and who would be the anointed one, the promised Messiah. Now, as such, Orthodox Islamic belief has upheld the tenet of the virgin birth of Jesus. And although the classical Islamic thinkers never dwelt on the question of the perpetual virginity of Mary at any great length, it was generally agreed in traditional Islam that Mary remained a virgin throughout her life. Now, this is clear Roman Catholic teaching. Where did Muhammad get that from? He's an illiterate, I can't read, 25-year-old, marries this woman Khadijah, who is claimed by Alberto Rivera, was a Roman Catholic agent, and also her relative who mentored Muhammad was a Roman Catholic agent. Where else would Muhammad get this story about Mary, the virgin birth of Jesus? Now you could say, okay, maybe he got it, he found a copy of the New Testament and he read it in the New Testament. But wait a minute. the New Testament does not teach that Mary continued to be a virgin for the rest of her life. The New Testament teaches that she finally had relations with her husband, Joseph, and had more children. So Mary, the New Testament clearly teaches, doesn't teach the perpetual virginity of Mary. But the Roman Catholic Church does. That's one of their most sacred false doctrines. It is clear that Muhammad was taught Roman Catholic doctrine by somebody. And if he couldn't read it, that means a person had to tell it to him. I think you have your biggest witness right here that Alberto Rivera, the ex-Jesuit, is telling the truth. Right? It's up to you. You decide. I know what I think. But let's keep going. See, the setup has come to reunite these two, the Vatican, the Roman Catholic Church, and Islam, to be part of the final end time events. The woman, the great whore, Mystery Babylon, the Roman Catholic Church, will ride the beast, which will be, I believe, headed by the Antichrist, who I'm pretty well sure from Scripture that the Antichrist will be a Muslim. All right? And I've dealt with that in other teachings, and we'll get into that next semester in the eschatology segment, and we'll talk about the Islamic Antichrist and I'll say this: what Islam believes about their coming Messiah figure is identical to what the Bible teaches about the Antichrist. It's identical. All right? But I want you to see this, because this happened during the Crusades. Everybody, Roman Catholics just love St. Francis of Assisi, right? He was this great, heroic, brave, courageous, young Franciscan, this monk, dedicated to Rome, went into the Crusades to fight the Muslims, to try to gain back control of the Holy Land. And if you read the account of St. Francis of Assisi when he met with the Sultan in the midst of the battle, the Muslim Sultan, it sounds like, that he was just proclaiming the gospel to him and being bold and willing to die. That's the Catholic version. It makes him a hero, right? But here we have the Muslim Times, the source, the HuffPost by David Liepert here, Dr. Abdul Alim. Now listen to this. He's talking about this. He says, St. Francis of Assisi, went to Egypt expecting to find martyrdom and evil men who needed to be converted to Christians in order to be saved from hellfire. But he left respectful of Muslims to the point that he encouraged Christians to emulate them in prayer and prostration, and to join Muslims and others in service to all despite their different religions. And he specifically told his followers not to try to convert Muslims. Now this is true. St. Francis of Assisi basically laid down the first, we're not going to try to convert you. You don't try to convert us, but let's work together. All right? This was the beginning of the Vatican, the great whore, Mystery Babylon, to bring her rebellious child home because she has a purpose. She has use. She has need of these Muslim foot soldiers that hate the Protestant Christians like they do. They have a common enemy. And Rome needs them. But this is part of the end. Now look what he goes on to say here. And he talks about Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio, whatever his name is, who became Pope a few years ago. Jesuit Pope. Now remember, knowing the first Jesuit Pope of the Roman Catholic Church ever. So even if this stuff is secret among Jesuits about the creation of Islam or the attempts to create Islam, he would know, right? So he becomes Pope, first Jesuit Pope, and what name does he pick? He picks Francis the First, after St. Francis of Assisi. Now, why do you think he would do that? Well, you know what Muslim Times says here, what they think. They think that the cardinal's decision to be called Francis as Pope has profound significance to Muslims regarding Muslim-Christian relations. The Christian St. Francis of Assisi, for whom he is chosen to be named for the rest of his life, is remembered by Muslims who know their history as a holy man, perhaps the only one since Jesus so recognized by Christians and Muslims alike. In fact, as such, as Muslims have saints in the first place, St. Francis could be considered one of our saints too. And look right here. Look here what it says. He says, I do know God promised to bring us all together one day, and that St. Francis and Sultan al-Malik found something special from God in each other that changed their worlds for the better and changed the world for everyone else for the better too. You see, there has to be, again, this link between Islam and the Vatican. They're going to work together for a while. Notice if you read Revelation, you see the whore will ride the beast for a while. But it says then, at the very end of the 7-year tribulation, that the beast, God will put it in the beast's heart. He will hate the whore and will destroy her. Well, who has a beef with the Roman Catholic Church more than Muslims who know the other history called the Crusades? The Crusaders, the Roman Catholic Crusaders went in and also massacred Muslims in the Middle East during the Crusades. It was a war. So you look like they're going to make peace for a little while for the New World Order, the one world government and all that to come into play. But then at the very end, God, like he does so many times, is going to turn them against each other again. But notice this picture was not in the article. I added this picture in here because it says why Islam and the West are not compatible. Now, what's interesting about that, and I was sharing this with someone the other day, let's look at this right here. This is what you see with Islam. This is another thing I'm just going to close with today. Daniel chapter 2, the statue, the dream that Nebuchadnezzar has about this statue with the head of gold, the arms and shoulders of silver, the waist of brass, the legs of iron, and the feet with 10 toes of iron mixed with clay. He breaks this down. Of course, Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar the interpretation of the dream. He says, you, Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, you're this head of gold. Well, the chest and the arms and the 2 shoulders, where the Medes and the Persians are going to come in, right? And the Medes and the Persians had 2 kings. That's the 2 arms. It's very specific. And then after that, the next kingdom that would come in and take over the world would be Alexander the Great in Greece. That's the bronze. Then after that, the strongest aspect of these metals, the 2 legs. All right? The 2 legs of iron. Now, most Bible interpreters will go, okay, these 2 legs are simply the Roman Empire. All right? The Roman Catholic Church the Roman Empire that eventually became the Roman Catholic Church. But here's what's interesting about it. Everything, remember, God doesn't miss anything. Just like the 2 arms represent something with Media Persia, you had 2 kings. You had a kingdom that was very odd to have 2 rulers, right? Well, you have 2 legs of iron. And I'm going to show you that I really believe the 2 legs of iron represent how that the Roman Empire and even the Roman Catholic Church at its pinnacle of strength controlled both the West, Europe, and the Middle East. Because if you go and you look at a map of the Roman Empire, when it was at its height, it covered not just Italy, not just Greece, and not just aspects, of Europe, but it covered into Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and then what? Swept around and had all the north top of Africa as well. Okay? So the old Roman Empire was east and west. It was Roman Catholic, European, Italian, and also Middle Eastern and Northern Africa. Now, who took over Northern Africa? Right? Remember, this fits because I believe that the Roman Catholic Church created Islam as well. So you see, again, this divide. And eventually, one side, the Ottoman Empire, came in and took over all of the Middle East and kind of pushed Rome out, but Rome still controlled Italy and Europe. All right? Now, the feet here, down here, the feet are made up of iron mixed with clay. Now, I've seen all kind of interpretations. People trying to throw Nephilim interpretations on this and all kinds of stuff. Here's what we know for a fact about this kingdom, the feet, the final kingdom with 10 toes, iron mixed with clay. Let's break it down a little bit. The 10 toes are the 10 kings. So this is a clear reference to both the 10 kings talked about in Revelation, 13, 17, the kingdom of the Antichrist that's going to have the 11th horn, the Antichrist, he's going to have 10 kings under him. That's going to be the final kingdom. That's the kingdom where the rock, Jesus, comes and crushes the feet, hits the feet, and the whole statue crumbles. All right? But why we would add, we've got gold was Babylon, silver, Media Persia, bronze, Greece, iron, Rome. Why would we say the clay is something else? Why would we say the clay's fallen angels or Nephilim or aliens or whatever you want to call them? It just doesn't make sense, right? If all of the material in this statue represents a kingdom, why wouldn't the clay represent a kingdom? Well, see, I'm gonna submit to you that I believe the clay does represent a kingdom, and it is the Arabs, the Muslims. Because what you have right now, look at this. This is actually foretelling everything. You had Europeans, you had the British and the French and everything in the early, late 1800s, early 1900s, going in and taking over Palestine, taking over the area of Transjordan, taking over, basically it was, Europe moving in and taking over the Middle East. But then as you get into the 1940s, after World War II, in the 1950s, what do you see? Europe began to turn loose, right, and allow the Arabs, the Muslims, to create their own countries. Transjordan, Pakistan, Syria, Lebanon, and even allowing Israel the Jews to create their own nation. So there was this time of, backing out of this. All right, but what are we seeing now, here in the end time? And I believe we're in the very end of the end time. We're seeing Muslims moving into Europe like crazy, aren't they? Germany, England, Switzerland, all into Europe. There's this psychotic idea that we can just allow this Muslim immigration into the West and it's going to work. Right? Now, so let's turn to Daniel chapter 2. And hang on, I'm going to show you this. Look, just so you see, I'm going to show one more slide and then we're going to go to the scriptures. You're going to see this in a minute, but we're going to look up this verse. Where it talks about this, as you're going to see, it talks about iron. Remember this, iron mixed with clay. We're going to look at that verse up. But the word mixed, listen, look at this, y'all. I want to see this now. Here's another hint that I'm right about this interpretation, that the clay has to do with the Muslims. Because he said there's going to be iron mixed with clay. The word mixed in Aramaic that's written there is Arab. Do you see that? And what does it say? The word Arab means to commingle, to mingle self, to mix. Look what it says here in the Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon, an Arabian. Arab people. So he's saying the iron will be Arabed with this clay people, I believe, that he's referring to Arabs that are Muslims. Not all Arabs are Muslims. So he's making a connection. They're going to be Arabed mixed with these Muslims. All right. Now let's go to Daniel 2. You can put that, put it up, and this is where we're going to finish today. Daniel chapter 2. Because we're after 11 o'clock. Hope you've learned something about Islam today. All right, let's go to, we'll go to verse 41. He says, "And whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part iron and part clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken." Look what he said, verse 43, "Whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, these shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed to clay." Now, I've heard people say, well, it says they will mingle themselves with the seed of men, so it must not be the seed of men. And I've thought that in the past too, but when I looked up the word seed, it can also just simply mean posterity. They're going to be mixed in with posterity. It means like this, that continually in generations, it's going to continue to get mixed and mingled together. And really it has taken several generations, really many decades, for this to get to this place where the iron and the clay are mixed and we're ready for the final, beast whore kingdom, right? And he says that in the days of these kings, verse 44, let's read that. "In the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." So he's talking about the kingdom of Jesus will come. But that's where it says, if you back up to verse 41, where it says you saw iron mixed with miry clay, that is that word Arab. And so it's very interesting. It means Arabian. Now, what we're going to get into, we'll get into next semester in our eschatology class when we get into Islam and the last days. But one of the things you're going to see, I believe that Islam, the Mahdi or the Islamic Messiah figure that's coming will be the Antichrist. And it's very, very, very interesting when you begin to compare the two, what they believe about their Messiah figure and what the Bible says about the Antichrist. So this is very pertinent, and it's interesting, isn't it, to know, what do Muslims believe and teach? Muhammad said it in the Quran, talking about striking at their necks. We know what he did in that massacre. He beheaded people. And it's interesting that beheading is specifically mentioned as a way the Antichrist is going to dispose of Christians who will not take the mark of the beast. That you see, who's running around beheading people? Well, there's only two groups of people in the world right now running around beheading people. All right? Number one on that list is Muslims. Number two, Mexican cartels and stuff will do it, but they learned it from the Muslims. But when you have a religion in the world that's 1/4 of the population and their leader advocates killing Christians and Jews, and primarily, if you can, cut their heads off, I think we have plenty of connections here to see that Islam's going to play a major role in the end time scenario and the further persecution of Christians. And listen, Muslims even have a principle, and I can't remember the Arabic word that they have for it, but they have a principle of making peace with you with full intention of, once they've made peace with you, once they get your trust and they get strong enough, they break that peace and attack you. Well, that's exactly what the Bible says the Antichrist is going to do. He's going to come by peace. He's actually going to make peace treaties. He's going to look like he's peaceful. He loves all religions. Let's all be together. And then halfway through, he flips. Right? So, going to be an interesting study, but we're going to close that today. I hope you guys learned something about Islam maybe you didn't know. Again, Kevin, he'll put the PowerPoint in Canvas as a PDF, and so you'll have all the slides. Some of the ones I didn't go through, particularly on the ones confirming, from Islamic sources about Muhammad marrying and having sex with Aisha when she was a little girl, even her while she was still playing with dolls. It's just sick. Sick stuff. But this is the world in which we live. And, it's funny. I'll tell you all this real quick. I had, a couple of years ago I got invited to a Muslim Christian unity dinner that this Muslim group was having at Auburn University, headed up by a professor who was from Turkey, Muslim. And he wanted to have lunch with me, but he wanted me to come to this thing, and they were trying to bring pastors and Muslims together, blah, blah, blah. Basically like this. They don't want you to try to convert them, but they're always trying to convert you, right? And then if they can't convert you, then you're on the enemies list, right? So we go, and, this guy tries to act like he's not, like he's not like ISIS in the Middle East, right? But I'm sitting there having coffee with him in a coffee shop in Auburn, and I start talking to him, and I said, well, here's what the Quran says about Christians and about Jews and about killing them and oppressing them and subduing them and striking at their necks. And I said, aren't you say you're not like ISIS. I said, but aren't they doing what Muhammad did? I said, doesn't the Quran say that Muhammad's the perfect man, the perfect example, and you're supposed to follow the example of Muhammad? He said, yes. I said, did Muhammad kill Christians and Jews and cut their heads off? I said, so aren't ISIS, and what was his name, the head of ISIS at the time, he was doing all that, I can't remember the guy's name now. I used to know it. I said, but aren't they doing what Muhammad did? Aren't they doing the Quran? It was uncomfortable. And I even had to point out to him. I said, do you know, he's from Turkey. He knew this. I said, we couldn't even have this conversation. If you and I were sitting in a coffee shop in Turkey, and I'm trying to talk, I shared the gospel with him. I shared the true gospel with him. And I said, and I'm sharing Jesus with you, I could be arrested and put in jail, killed, in Turkey, in your country where you come from. Well, I'm going to tell you what, there's a lot of silence in that conversation. He really couldn't say anything. He couldn't deny it. But again, most Christians don't know what they believe. I was in Nigeria one time, seated. It's a long story, but I was detained in Nigeria, wrongly so. But I was detained with another guy from the Sudan, and we were sitting in the same room. And this guy was a Muslim from the Sudan, and we got to talking about Christianity and Islam. And we're talking about it, And so we're going back and forth about their beliefs and our beliefs. And so here's what I did with the guy. And he was, you could tell he was well-dressed, very wealthy, expensive clothing, jewelry, the whole. This guy, obviously, whatever business he was in, it was he was well-to-do. And But I asked him, I said, well, listen, maybe we can agree on one thing. Can we agree that it's wrong to kill people who have a different religious belief than you do? And he would not agree to that. Now here is an educated, wealthy, well-dressed, well-spoken, obviously multilingual, multi-language Muslim from the Sudan. He would not say it was wrong to kill people for having a different religious belief than. These are facts. I've been to countries preaching, Nigeria, Mauritius, even in Israel, where he said, you don't go there preaching. And they wouldn't, the leaders who invited me to these countries would not let me go in certain areas because the Muslims will kill you. This is reality. This is truth. Bomb on the plane that I'm on coming back from flying in the local airport in Nigeria. I mean, it's not just reading it in a book for me. I've been around them. I've been to the Middle East. I've been to these other countries. In Nigeria, I've been to Nigeria twice. Muslims are going into churches and hacking Christians up with machetes, killing their children with machetes. No, this is not the religion of peace that they claim on the CNN and the fake news. No, this is the religion of Satan. This is a religion of violence. And as you're going to see next semester, we'll get into it, it's just the religion of death that the book of Revelation foretold. So, anyway, let's pray and we will be dismissed this morning. Father in heaven, we thank you, Lord, for your truth, that we live in a time, Lord, that the truth is easily to access and to search out and to find. You said everything hidden will be revealed, and that's happening in these last days. And Lord, I pray that both Christians that are listening to this and will be edified and learn and be better prepared to speak to people, both Muslim and non-Muslim, about Islam. But I pray also if Muslims hear this, that God, you will open their eyes to the truth of their religion, of its satanic, demonic origins, to the satanic verses, to the influence that Muhammad was under, to his pedophilia, to all of his violence and murder, and all the things that have been passed to them through this satanic religion of the moon god. Lord, we pray that eyes would be open and lives changed, and they would come to know you, the true God, the Lord Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for our sins, who loves us, who rose from the dead the third day, who's ready to forgive their sins and to save them and to love them and to give them eternal life. And I ask you, Lord, to do that in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, class dismissed.